We're back. Thanks for staying with us. Joined now by Dr. David Cunic. He's the CEO of UCS Advisors. David, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Don. It's always a pleasure.
Well, it's an apropos background that you have in the interview because I want to talk to you about cannabis. You're going to a big cannabis convention next week, aren't you?
That's correct. Myself and some of my UCS Advisors team will be at the Benzinga Cannabis Capital Conference next week in Miami. And then a few weeks after that, we'll be at the MJ Unpacked Conference in New York City from May 18th to May 20th. So two huge cannabis conferences are coming up over the next couple of weeks.
So basically in the cannabis industry, they're taking a break from COVID.
Yeah, you could say that. Some cannabis companies are still feeling the ripple effects from COVID, and that's mainly with hiring additional employees, also dealing with some logistical issues, especially with having enough drivers to move products around, and also receiving packaging goods from overseas. But overall, the cannabis industry is in full effect, and I mean, we're seeing a lot of mergers and acquisitions already occurring in the first few months this year.
Well, this is something we talked about a couple of years ago, that there was going to be a degree of consolidation in the industry, and you're starting to see that now, aren't you?
We truly are, and what's interesting is that several cannabis industry experts, including myself, really predicted that 2022, we're going to see a lot of mergers and acquisitions. We're going to see a lot of the smaller players who did all the dirty work, you could say, with working with the lobbyists or working with the states to get cannabis recreational or to get their license. A few years have passed, and now the larger companies are coming in and swooping in and just becoming larger and larger.
Well, cannabis is legal to some degree in nearly every state now, isn't it?
Yes, we have over 32 states that have some type of medical, over 10 plus states that have legal, and I want to say the statistic now is 1 out of every 10 people live in an area here in America where some form of cannabis is legal, either medical-wise or recreational-wise.
What do you suppose the future holds for federal legality?
The $1 million question. Thank you for asking me that, Don. I'm still think that we're not going to really see a huge change until probably 2024, more so really 2025. I think a lot's going to determine the next presidential election, and also what's going to happen with banking and cannabis. I know people talk about the rescheduling of cannabis from a Schedule I drug to a Schedule II or lower, but really once we get banking opening up, and we're going to get the federal banks involved, we're going to see a huge increase of capital come to this cannabis market, and which is going to really should have the market react accordingly to that.
Big institutional investors are basically waiting on the sidelines for something like that to happen, aren't they?
They are, and the one thing that's interesting, Don, is a lot of people have been asking about how many more of these smaller banks are getting involved in cannabis, while the Wells Fargos and the Bank of Americas and are just sitting on the sidelines waiting. But you're seeing credit unions, you're seeing these smaller state banks or also smaller savings banks getting involved in cannabis now because they want to be part of this industry.
Well, cannabis took off like a shot from its inception, and then it kind of quieted down for a couple of years, probably coinciding with COVID, quite frankly. But I'm seeing a real resurgence in 22.
You're absolutely right, because what happens during a pandemic? What does well? Drugs and alcohol. Cannabis is still considered a drug. And especially out here on the East Coast, when you saw a lot of traditional investors who didn't really want to invest in cannabis at all, they said, oh my God, cannabis is in demand. People still want their cannabis just like they want their alcohol in the middle of a pandemic. People don't have jobs, but they're still paying money to get their cannabis, to get their medicine. So a big light bulb went off for a lot of old school traditional investors saying this industry is here to stay. And even if we look at the trend of cannabis every year, its overall gross revenue keeps going up and up and up.
What do you suppose that the rest of the year holds in store for the industry, in your opinion?
I think we're going to see some significantly more mergers and acquisitions. I think we're going to see some more hedge funds who were anti-cannabis now starting to invest in cannabis. And I'm really excited to see what's going to happen out here on the East Coast, because out here in New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and even New England, you're having a surplus of states now starting to roll out their recreational programs, and giving out more licenses. So we're seeing a lot of West Coast companies start to venture out here to the East Coast to try to get a piece of that pie.
Well, David, you're recognized as an industry expert. When people are asking you to speak at their conventions, what are they wanting you to talk about?
They mainly want to talk about how to attract investors to their company. And, or as I tell people, before you get on Shark Tank, you know, they kind of want to hire someone like us here at UCS Advisors to teach them how to attract investors, how to talk to investors, how to actually figure out a proper exit strategy. Because at the end of the day, a lot of people just don't know how to go out to raise capital for their companies.
Well, you're absolutely right. What you said a couple of minutes ago, you know, a couple of years ago, there was a quadrant of investors that just didn't want to look at the industry at all. And now they're taking a much closer look this year.
They are, and they're taking a closer look, and they really are looking at management teams, and they're looking at trajectory. Like, how can we take your company from here to get it up to here? You know, how are you going to grow to multiple locations? That's what a lot of investors are looking for these days.
So they're looking at it like a real business.
One more time, Don?
They're looking at it like a real business.
Exactly. They're looking at it like a real business because a lot of investors lost their money in the early 2010s. They were too early to market. They would invest in people that didn't have a good management team or didn't have a clear vision or didn't have a clear vision how for the investor to get his return on investments. Now investors are more educated, and there's so many great deals out there. That's really an investor's market. They can pick and choose where they want to deploy their capital.
Once again, UCS Advisors, Dr. David Cunic. David, good luck at the Benziga conference next week. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.